Welcome to Just the Tip-Sters, your favorite true crime podcast. This episode will be part 2 of the Lake Waco murders. Is Angelique gonna sneeze? Oh no, she's just rubbing her nose. Is Siren Marie Morgan Humphreys causing you distress?
I think it's a pollen. It's that time of year.
Okay, good.
Spring is here.
Just today. I prefer to blame Siren, but if you want to say pollen, I have to say it's been really bad, and I would kill a man for Claritin D. That's all I'm saying.
And you almost have to kill a man for Claritin D.
I know.
They want your ID.
Well,
they got to pat you down. This is why I come to your house for D.
Yeah. Let's not start rumors.
Claritin D.
People are already going to think I'm a dude because my voice is very deep and I do not have the D. I do have the Claritin D, but I don't have any other. And speaking of that, can I just say how angry I am at Amazon for delivering 2 packages yesterday to my neighbor's home, who is a little older and apparently wanted to open everything, even though it was, addressed to me. So how they send you the picture of where they delivered it. So I'm like, that's not my front door. Oh, that's Larry and Sharon's front door. So I go next door and I knock on the door and Larry answers. He goes, oh, I have some things for you. And I thought he would hand me 2 packages. No. He hands me 2 open packages. Oh, here, you have this and you have this. And I'm like, thanks, Larry. Thank God it was Mountain Dew Kickstart Black Cherry and turmeric and not Astroglide and handcuffs or, some shit. Like, thanks, Amazon, and thanks, Larry.
Old people are nosy, Melissa.
He opened them both, he opened them completely and took the turmeric out. It was on his dining room table. I'm like, Larry, get off my shit.
Old people are nosy. Old people are nosy.
I'm nosy too. And I'm old, but I wouldn't, if it said this was not your package, I would not open it.
Or maybe he was trying to steal it. And the only reason that turmeric made it into this house is because you knocked on the door and said, hey, Lair.
I retrieved it after getting the picture from Amazon. I'm still mad at them. I'm sorry. I'm still angry at Amazon for, and you can give the thumbs up or the thumbs down. How was your delivery? Was it great or not so great? I'm like, not so great. My nosy neighbor, Larry, got it. I gave him the thumbs down. Delivered to the right goddamn. I mean, I get it. They're probably very overwhelmed. They may be contractors. They may not be official, because everybody's doing a side hustle now or something, It's a double-edged sword for me. Delivering things like this is easier nowadays because of technology. You can keep shit straight, but it's also, difficult because everyone is getting things delivered to their home now because of the pandemic. And no one's going to go back to,
Oh, and I will have
shopping.
Multiple deliveries a week. So I feel just sorry.
Me too. I try to put it on pick your Amazon delivery day. And if it's not something I'm in a big hurry for, which let's be honest, most of the time with Amazon, I'm not.
Right.
That's why I got 2 packages delivered yesterday. Mm-hmm. Mountain Dew Kickstart, which I ordered 5 days earlier, just in case I couldn't find any at the $1.25 tree, which, by the way, I could not.
You were protesting because they jacked it up a quarter?
What kind of bastards? What kind of bastards do that?
In this time of crisis, too, why would you do that to us?
Right.
Everything else has gone up.
It does seem shitty timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Okay, what I do want to talk about is I got a lovely review. Okay. I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out the name. You know how you have to give yourself like a name on Apple Podcasts?
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed. It finally dawned on me. I think the person is trying to say nerd, but it's Nurrred. And I was like, Nurred. Maybe backward it's Darren. Maybe it's a sign or it's a clue. Yeah, no. I think they were trying to say nerd. Mm-hmm. So it's entitled Pairs Well with Wine, which made me laugh. It's a 5-star review. Had me at just the tip, in parentheses, my inner 12-year-old giggles with you. This is a binge-worthy show, ! Delivers true crime stories that's more victim-focused in an organically unscripted manner. Parentheses, translation, like having a conversation with a good friend versus just a talking head. Best intros I've come across, parentheses, producer Mark will be missed, definitely complimented you, but not completed, which I think is fascinating. So I know future shows will be different, but we'll still have that Melissa Morgan signature stamp. Thanks for going well above the research and investing your time and sharing the stories, but actually being a boot on the ground to help victims and their families. I'm a forever listener. Heart T. And then there's Siren Marie Morgan Humphreys. Yeah, it was a very... Is that her or you? So Angelique does...
I am a voice artist. So
you're magnificent. You that could easily be Siren. Yeah. Do your baby. Oh my God. It's like I've given birth. Oh my God, listen to her.
Her.
Both hers. You and the other bitch, Siren Marie Morgan Humphreys. Oh my God. I don't know what to do with her. Maybe I'll put her outside, but then she'll just bark at every squirrel. Okay. That was a lovely review. Sometimes you get a review that makes you feel like it's, I will be honest with you, I messaged a few friends and I was like, did you send that? And they're like, no.
That's nice. It was sweet.
It was very well. It's just, it seems like someone knows me, whether they do or not, like whether we've met. It feels like it's from a friend. I still can't figure out who Nerd is or T,
but you do understand that by doing these shows, and T has listened to enough of them. I mean, we feel like we know you.
You know what? That's a good point. I am much more auditory than visual, and I feel like, I know people. They used to say, like with TV, you invite someone into your living room once a week or something. With all of the audio content that's available, whether you listen to somebody every day on the radio or a podcast or however you listen, I guess you do tend to feel like people if they have a style that isn't, as someone says, a talking head. Mm-hmm. And the thing about true crime is there's lots of ways to present it. I love certain podcasts that just read me the facts. Sometimes I get bored with that. I think it all comes down to the voice for me. Mm-hmm. If I like the voice, I can listen to that. Mm-hmm. I also really love podcasts where, someone like Mark Maron, who is so honest, you're like, I don't know that I need to know about the corn in your poop, but he'll tell you anyway. You know what I mean? He's very open. It's like he cuts open his sternum and shows you his chest, his heart. I'm not that open, but I'm also missing a filter. So if people feel like they know me, maybe they do. It's one of the things I loved about Mark Humphreys is that he had a persona. Mm-hmm. He was himself, but producer Mark was a persona. Yeah. And I love that. And I think it allowed me to be plain old basic bitch me, because I don't know how to be. I could never do what you do. I could never do voices, or I can't. Every one of my accents sounds like Count Dracula. I mean, I can't do specific.
But I love Count Dracula.
Yeah, I do too. I'm a big.
That's the Count.
The Count.
Two,
right.
Three.
I'm a big fan of vampires, but all of my accents are vaguely Eurotrash. They don't. Yeah. So anyway, I'm so happy that you were able to do your Siren Marie Morgan Humphreys impression or generic dog and your baby. When you did that a couple of weeks ago, I was like, that's magnificent. That's the best baby I've ever heard.
I actually got paid for that. If you go to my IMDb page, there's a line or two where I played a baby.
You play everything. That's what's so magnificent about me is the flexibility of your vocal cords. Like Siren. Okay, so I met in person, just a small update. I met Bobby V, very excited, my study buddy from criminal investigation class. 22 or 23 years at the LAPD. And he's a fascinating dude, and he's going to be a guest.
Nice.
I know. I was very excited because he's like a male version of me. If I had really big forearms and biceps, he's very authentic. He just doesn't like I peppered him with a bunch of questions, and he was just like, yep, this, or yep, nope, or yep. he didn't care if I didn't like his answers, or he doesn't care if anyone likes his answers. He's just authentic, just very, honest. And I really love that about him. And I was like, hey, would you consider being on what can you talk about? Because he has been a part of some pretty big arrests. Ooh. Yeah. The Grim Sleeper.
Ooh.
Uh-huh. Whitey Bulger. Ooh. I mean, he's in his career, a couple of biggies, and we're going to talk about them. And I was
you could spend a whole show on 2 shows on Whitey Bulger alone.
Yes. And the Grim Sleeper, I think I did 2 or 3 episodes on the Grim Sleeper. And the stuff he told me was really fascinating. And I'm really excited to talk to him. And I was like, what can you talk about? He goes, I can talk about anything. Most detectives I talk to are like, can you say this? And it's like, well, let me find out. He is not afraid to talk about stuff. He knows he can talk about it. I'm like, okay, good. And if he feels like it's something he would just keep that, not be like, let's not. You don't know how many times I've been like, do you need to hear it first? Like, have the right of first refusal? And it's like, yeah, I need to have it approved. So I was just amazed at how he moves through life, which is completely authentic and honestly, and doesn't care if you don't like his opinion. It's just his opinion. But I really am looking forward to talking to him.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Excellent. Blah, 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 blah.
Thank you, Count Dracula. My only impression as you mock me with your vocal acuity. And
Not mocking
Yes, you are.
I am.
I can only do a vampire. That's pretty much it.
I love the Count.
I do too.
One of my favorites.
I have a Count puppet. My mom got me a long, long time ago. I love me some Count. Anything vampire related, I'm a big, big fan of that. But yeah. All right, part 2 of the Lake Waco murders and Tipster Dorota. I'm putting beads over on the negative side of my abacus for you because this, and I've only complained to Angelique 100 times about, this is a toughie. We could do absolutely 4 or 6 episodes. It's just that it's so layered. I mean, 40 years is a long time, but when it was happening, literally the 80s and the 90s were kind of the big hub of when this case was going on because of, retrials and convictions being tossed out and appeals out the butthole. What would it be ripe for is if someone were to do a very extensive documentary, like a multi-part documentary. And it would be, difficult maybe because everyone involved now is deceased, including the main law enforcement officer who's kind of everything surrounds him. He just passed away in November of 2021. So, it would be tough, but I'm still going to ask for tips, and I will give you a number that you can call because I'm not sure this is as adjudicated as we'd like to think. So we're going to go back, just a little refresher. Tuesday, July 13th of 1982, 3 teenagers take, a freshly cashed paycheck and a car and head to Lake Waco to hang out there. And Lake Waco is kind of an odd umbrella. There's several parks around the lake. So, they were at Spiegelville Park, but let's just call it Lake Waco. So they were hanging out and doing teenagery things like, drinking and smoking pot, whatever. So 2 17-year-old girls, Raylene Rice and Jill Montgomery, and 1 18-year-old man, Kenneth Franks. And they were actually murdered probably because they were moved in Spiegelville Park. So it's near Lake Waco, but it's like a series of parks, and they all kind of get under that umbrella of Lake Waco. So a patrolman for the Waco PD, Truman Simons, is one of the first people on the scene, and there comes a call on Wednesday, July 14th of 1982, from 2 fishermen who say that they have found a young man and his body is against a tree. And then when the law enforcement officers get there, they find the 2 girls. And it's an ugly scene, as we had mentioned in the first episode. So Truman Simons, whether you believe it or not, is a guy that most people either loved or hated. There's not a lot of gray. He just wasn't a law enforcement officer that, you either loved everything he did or you thought he was, a narcissistic monster who invented a bunch of shit. A lot of his methods were, called into question, and they were not, sanctioned by his superiors. And I think he would admit that too. He was often called brusque, and he was 37 years old. He'd been a patrolman, and he was getting kind of frustrated and bored. So he had let his superiors know, look, I'm going to be moving on within a year. And he did. And this case had him move on in a way that I think wasn't what he expected. I think he thought he'd move to a different jurisdiction. And what he ended up doing was taking a pay cut and lowering his level and becoming a corrections officer. But we'll get to that a little later. So if you think what his methods were not fair, I think he would say that there's no fair in murder. And I get that, you know, I mean, in my mind, if he thinks you committed a murder, he's going to go to great lengths to prove that you did and make sure you serve time. Does that mean that all of his methods were, you know, above board? No. But he spent 35 years in law enforcement. And as I said, he passed away in November of 2021 at the age of 78. After he retired, he spent 20 more years being a private investigator. But ironically, he worked for defense attorneys. So in my mind, he was kind of well-rounded in his law enforcement career, you know? At first, he's arresting the bad guys,
Right.
and then he's helping defend guys that he think are, you know, that he might think are wrongly accused. So it's you know, he's such a complicated guy. It's hard for me to say, wow, he did some shady shit. And I think he probably did. But I also think, whether it's true, he thought he was doing the right thing. It doesn't mean that his methods were right and maybe some people got hurt. I'm just going to hope that he proceeded through life in the way that he thought was the best for the victims. Even if it, you know, it doesn't mean it's right. And I'm, you know, this case is just so layered, and there are probably a lot of cops out there like him, for better or worse. And that's one reason why I'm anti-death penalty now. You know, I just, you know. So we'd mentioned the book Careless Whispers from Carlton Stowers. He's a pretty well-known true crime author. And he said, in my career, I've met a lot of people in law enforcement and none who I admire more than Truman Simons. And Carlton Stowers does something really odd, in my opinion. He, I think, put Truman Simons on a pedestal. And I would want him to, because he's journalistic,
Right.
I would want him to be more
Objective.
Yeah. He did things I think are odd, like, you know, the three defendants, Gilbert and Tony Melendez, the brothers, and David Wayne Spence. Carlton Stowers bought Gilbert Melendez's truck, and it was stored at Truman Simons' property, where it sat outside for 2 years and then was sold to a scrapyard. I know. It was like, are you buying it because you think there's evidence, but then you don't test it for evidence and then you scrap it?
Or
Or you think Truman Simons developed a story about the three defendants and you want to destroy something because it proves they weren't there.
exactly.
So even Jill Montgomery's brother, Brad, said, you know what, we held Truman on a pedestal for so long, maybe he orchestrated this whole thing. Even one of the victims' brothers. I think it was the sale of Gilbert Melendez's truck that pushed Brad Montgomery over the edge. He's still at David Wayne Spence's execution. He still believed they'd gotten the right people.
Right.
But these kind of actions bring so much, you know, into question. I mean,
Yeah. Why do you do that? I don't.
okay.
That's, I mean, because
know.
it's either for something really, really bad, or, I mean, if he didn't test the truck, then.
So I believe what happened was that when it was in custody, the truck was tested and there was nothing on it that showed anything, pro or con. That was one of the stories from the defendants changed so much. It's hard to know what was true and what was not. At one point, Gilbert and Tony Melendez both said that Gilbert's truck was used to transport the bodies because it was pretty clear they weren't murdered where they were found.
Right.
So, but there was nothing, but their stories changed. It's like, how do you prove a negative? How do you prove, it's like, well, we did this, but no, we didn't. When Truman Simons had retired, he was a sergeant with the McLennan County Sheriff's Office. But before that, he left the Waco PD and became a corrections officer so he could get into the prison and be close to David Wayne Spence.
And we talked about this last episode where you said that he used to pray with them, that he used to go. Mm-hmm. I
think the
crazy.
Thing it is. I think the thing that, and here's Truman Simons wasn't a particularly every week going churchgoer, but he did quote a Bible verse that said, "Blessed are the peacekeepers because they are the children of God." So I think he used that as a motto for doing what he did. It doesn't mean that everything he did was right. I still want to believe that he kept a higher calling in the front of his mind. It bothers me if he put pieces together that maybe didn't fit to make something work.
Right.
And I'm not coming down on him completely because it's a bunch of people. It's the DA who was kind of young and hungry and trying to, who ended up in some legal issues. We'll get to that. But so the convictions of David Wayne Spence, Gilbert and Tony Melendez, and Munir Deeb are called into question 40 years later. And I will say that Truman Simons called the Lake Waco murders my albatross. That could be one reason why they kept the truck, why they bought the truck and kept the truck. I think Carlton Stowers and Truman Simons were both obsessed with this case. And Truman Simons had a 35-year career and saw a lot, and Carlton Stowers wrote a lot of books.
Yeah.
So this case, I think, was, a big one.
Can I ask you, did it ever make it into court that he was corresponding and had a relationship with the alleged perpetrator of the crime? Because to me, if I would have heard that as a juror, I would have been like, what?
Actually, at Munir Deeb's retrial, very great question, Angelique. At Munir Deeb's retrial, because his conviction was overturned in 1997, and he actually submitted a 114-page habeas corpus, a writ of habeas corpus by himself.
Wow.
A lot of misspellings, but it was also cogent. And they took it into account and they retried him. And he was found, they said retried on the basis of what originally convicted him, which is, 7 inmates. We're going to get to them too. One of them who, said that Munir Deeb was the mastermind and Spence and the Melendez brothers were, acting out a revenge for a $3,000 drug debt that, Kenneth Franks owed Munir Deeb, and yet there's no proof of that at all. So the reason it's going to be hard to open this back up, and I swear I think there are people who are willing to do that, is because, the Melendez brothers both died in prison and David Wayne Spence was executed. So and then now Truman Simons is dead. I mean, it's just, the more time goes on, So the Melendez brothers, their stories changed on the stand. And when you asked about Truman Simons, being questioned about being friends with David Spence, they're like, couldn't you, have influenced this? And didn't you? And he's like, I am a deputy sheriff. I am not an attorney or an assistant DA. I don't have the power to do anything. And I think that can be called into question. He had the power to get a job as a corrections officer, take a pay cut.
But even if he didn't have the quote unquote power, he still had the power of persuasion.
And influence, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to be powerful at all to influence someone who's in a vulnerable position.
So these are why things have been called into question. Like later on, it came out that some of the inmates who testified against David Wayne Spence and the Melendez brothers and Munir Deeb were given lighter sentences. They were given earlier release dates, even though they said they had been offered nothing special. So that came out later, but that was later. I hate to say that.
Do we ever, 1,000 episodes of Law and Order, do we ever believe that they didn't get something for their testimony? Because why would you? Why would you do it? To get out of prison for a day to come and hang out at the courthouse?
What if you felt an overwhelming sense of guilt? And I feel like this needs to be said. I think there are some people who would testify out of the goodness of their heart.
Well, I wouldn't believe them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I get it. I mean, I feel like the only people you would trust would be if they were an intentional plant and they worked, in law enforcement and they were put in a cell and somebody said something and you taped it or something. I'm not, honor among thieves. I'm not sure I believe that. So I get what you're saying. So this is kind of a crappy thing that happened while David Wayne Spence was, in prison awaiting trial. His mother, Juanita White, was murdered and raped in her home. She was 54, and she was raped, beaten, sodomized, and suffocated. She had worked the night before at a barbecue place, bussing tables and washing dishes, and she didn't show up for church. They did a welfare check. She had been bitten, which is interesting, considering we're going to talk about bite mark evidence. She fought for her life. Her nose was broken. Her ear was torn off. There were marks all over her body where she had been bitten. She had been raped. This is a 54-year-old woman who'd been married 4 times, had seen her son called a monster for killing, 3 kids over a $3,000 drug debt that wasn't even real. And she had started investigating on her own, trying to exonerate her son. And her murder's never been solved. And this is also really crappy. After law enforcement had cleared her house, they got a call a few hours later and said, come back. They came back to her home, and it had been completely tossed. The room that was the most torn up was David Wayne Spence's bedroom. Drawers pulled out, everything torn over, torn up. Someone was looking for something specific. Mm-hmm. And this is the timing of this is really uncomfortable, Angelique. It wasn't a home invasion robbery gone bad. Her TV was still there and her car was found 15 blocks away.
Right.
Tried to make it look like it was that. You don't rape and murder somebody to steal their TV and their car.
And if she was bussing tables and washing dishes, I imagine she didn't have a car.
She had 3 jobs. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. She had 3 jobs. This is what's so uncomfortable. She had mentioned to her son's attorneys she had received a letter from her son from prison saying that Robert Snelson, Snelson, who had testified at David's trial, said to him in a phone call, I bit Jill Montgomery's nipple off. He admitted that. Now that's what her son says. That's a letter from her son.
At least that's what he says.
Yeah, I mean, he has a reason to say that because he's in prison for it, and I don't know if every phone call is taped. I don't know why it wouldn't have been, but he said it was in a phone call. So Robert Snelson had been released after he had testified against David Wayne Spence. He had been released. Now, would he call him and say, I'm the one that bit Jill Montgomery's nipple off? I testified against you, but I'm the one that did it.
I mean, he's a sick man.
Right.
He's a sick man.
I think there's a lot of sick men here, unfortunately.
But let's say Robert Snelson did do this. He still didn't do it alone.
Right.
They're 3
You're right.
Teenagers.
You're right.
So he couldn't have done it alone.
You're right. Yep. You're right. I mean, yeah.
But what has to be haunting to everyone involved is the way the mother is murdered.
Yeah. For what reason?
For what reason?
Yeah.
And the bite marks, and either it's somebody
Sending a message?
sending a message, like a copycat thing, or
I'm
it's
the one
killer.
who did it. Yeah, I'm one of the ones who did it. And I think you're right. I think there's more than one. It would be difficult. I mean, you might be able to be, depending on if you have a gun and they have nothing, you could wrangle three people, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if he were armed.
Yeah. And they were just kids who were,
But you're out in the woods at the lake.
Yeah.
I mean, we grew up by a lake.
Yep.
Tell me you haven't been in a situation, because I have, where it's you and your girlfriend and some other people and some crazy stuff happens in the woods, and what do? Run.
Right.
You run.
But do you run if someone has a gun? That's why I'm thinking the girl, like, why would the girls, or what if he's holding one of the girls hostage and the other two could run? To me, it was like, do you get a running start before he's able to take you down? I mean, I don't know how.
Yeah, that's true.
The thing is, we don't know how any of this happened.
The gun.
Yeah, something that keeps them quiet and subdued. That's the part that, I don't think anyone really knows. I don't think we're ever really going to know. You can make all the, assumptions, conjecture you want.
What was there any toxicology done?
So DNA, this is uncomfortable. DNA was finally tested in 2020.
Wow.
Nothing was usable.
You think gun, but then also maybe drugging.
They had nothing in their systems that they hadn't already consumed. There were some beer cans found around them. I don't even know if pot was found in their systems. They, it was theorized that they were there to drink and smoke pot. I don't even know if that was. There really was no evidence that Kenneth Franks imbibed in drugs. He drank, but the whole theory that Munir Deeb, had him and the two girls assassinated almost like they were collateral damage. At first it was like a $3,000 drug debt, that Kenneth Franks owed Munir Deeb. And then it was, he had a crush on Gail Kelly, who looked like Jill Montgomery. So, and it was known that Munir Deeb and Kenneth Franks didn't get along, but that's not enough to murder three people. And then how does he pay? Munir Deeb didn't have any money. His store was going to be taken over by the bank. How does he pay, the life insurance policy on Gail Kelly, who didn't end up dying?
I owe you. I owe you.
Yeah, here's an I owe you.
Go ahead and kill them people, and I owe you.
I'll pay you. I'll pay you Tuesday for a hamburger
I was
today.
going to say, I can't even get a hamburger on credit. I don't know what he's doing.
Exactly. The mastermind theory, is kind of odd. So Juanita's other son, Stephen, David Wayne Spence's brother, Stephen, said that his mom had been receiving death threats and, that she thought her phone had been tapped because she's looking into her son's, incarceration. This is so uncomfortable. We still don't know what happened to her, So the female detective that was the first on the scene with Juanita White's murder, she started to suspect one of her own coworkers, Truman Simons.
I wasn't going to say it. I'm glad she did.
Yeah, and she, she's the one that found out that some of the informants that were getting their cases dismissed, even though they had all said, there's no deals promised. So Detective Jan Price said that several of the informants told her that they were instructed not to talk to her by Truman Simons if she came questioning them about their testimony.
Wow.
So then we get to the DA, who's hot to trot. He was a new DA, and he was like, I'm going to get this Lake Waco murders. They're going to be convicted. And so he was very much trying to prosecute David Wayne Spence and the Melendez brothers. And he ends up resigning in 1988 because he's accused of federal racketeering and bribery charges.
Wow.
Even other attorneys in his office working under him said he would not prosecute valid criminal cases. And he said, I'm being targeted by those who are jealous of my successes. It's a witch hunt. Yeah. So in 1991, Texas had carried out more executions than any other state in the Union. And by the end of the 1980s, they were responsible for roughly 1/3 of all executions.
And this is why you are
Anti-death penalty at this point. So, and it really wasn't that David Wayne Spence didn't have a lot of great resources. He had court-appointed attorneys who were graduates from Harvard and NYU law schools, and they were both anti-death penalty attorneys. So there's a few other people brought up. There was a local named Tab Harper who was brought up as an alternate suspect. A friend of a friend of a friend of his said that he bragged about killing 3 people at Coney Park. One statement actually that was given to law enforcement said he was enacting revenge on a $3,000 drug debt owed by Kenneth Franks. At this point, I believe all of this information had gotten out and people could cherry pick what they could repeat or say they heard. I mean, I just feel like there wasn't enough secrecy about the details. That's how I think a lot of this, it's 2022 and I see it sometimes with more modern cases, but it was a lot worse back then.
right.
Everybody talked. It was, even people in law enforcement. There wasn't a 24-hour news cycle. It was a lot of hearsay and rumor.
Let me ask you this: when it comes to the Melendez kid who came forward and said, okay, I'm going to tell you some stuff because I want to avoid the death penalty. Was that information that he had, was that fresh and was that new? Was it viable? Or was it rumors that he heard around that he just repeated because it sounded good?
That is a terrific question. And it unfortunately can go both ways. Gilbert Melendez said David Wayne Spence used a whoopee stick to rape them. There was no, they had both been sexually assaulted. Both girls had been sexually assaulted. There was no DNA. There was no semen, no hairs. Tony Melendez said he tied a bra around her own bra around one of the victims' ankles. And he said, David Wayne Spence said, won't it be funny when they find this kid with the sunglasses on his face? They both had information that only the killer would have. Unfortunately, the information that only the killers should have had gotten out there. Mm-hmm. There is question whether that information was fed to the Melendez brothers by, let's say, Truman Simons or someone else, so that they could say this and then implicate David Wayne Spence as the, actual murderer under the mastermind of Munir Deeb, or if they were actually there. Could they have said this so that they got lighter sentences? Because neither of them got the death penalty. They got life in prison.
And we know how memories work. It's very easy for us to have a conversation again and again and again until I can visualize and see and in some ways believe that I was there.
That's exactly true.
I mean, it happens with our childhood mememories all the time.
Absolutely.
I could see
the
some
Mick
of the
Martin
stories,
trial.
Yeah,
you're a family who had a daycare were brought up for recovered memories that never happened.
Yeah.
And that's what they say Truman Simons achieved by working at the same prison David Wayne Spence, who wasn't, he didn't have an IQ of 80. I don't think he had an IQ of 150, but he, wasn't, compromised intellectually. But they were saying that he was just gaslighted by Truman Simons, that you had mentioned, they would pray together.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a quote where he says, "Did I kill those kids?" And Truman Simons says, "I think you did." And David Wayne Spence says, "Then why don't I remember?"
Yeah.
So I can't say that the Melendez brothers, their stories changed, the timeline changed. They say if you did it, you remember. And
I don't know how you can't remember.
Yeah, something that terrible.
Killing 3 people with a freaking knife.
Right. And if you have, they were stabbed like 47 times. If you have, details that only, quote unquote, only the killers would have. I don't know how the number of people that the Melendez brothers talked to in prison, and quite honestly, the sheer volume of people that David Wayne Spence talked to. How do you discount that? One thing that could be said is that David Wayne Spence loved to brag. He always wanted to be something bigger and badder than he was. That's actually his wife's quote. She said, he said to her during a visit that they had 2 sons, and she would bring the 2 sons for a once a year 4-hour visit.
They were divorced though, right?
They were divorced. She was his ex-wife. And she brought the 2 boys to see him for their once a year visit. And at that time, she said, how does he know all this information? He's saying you said all this stuff, you did all this stuff. And he said, I thought I could outsmart him. And she said, did you say these things so that he would come back for more? And David Wayne Spence said yes. Is he telling her the truth? I don't know. I know.
He's lonely, and this is his friend.
Yeah, his friend. He did say to his wife, the only person that talks to me here is the guy who's trying to pin all this on me. That's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking if that's true.
It's not heartbreaking if he really did bite her nipple off.
Mm-hmm.
If he really did whoopee stick those girls, it's not heartbreaking.
Right. Oh.
But if he didn't.
Right. So this is another weird left turn. Kenneth Frank's dad, Richard Franks. Kenneth was the only one reported missing. He was supposed to be home by midnight, and they're found the following day. When Kenneth did not come home at midnight, Richard Franks says he drove around, and his car was actually seen at Lake Waco, parked. He says it was at midnight. It was seen around 4 a.m. He changes his story somewhat, but the whole time he's saying he's distraught looking for his son. They make him take a polygraph, which he does very badly on. And at the end, he gets very upset and says, "Oh God, I was with them every minute, all night when they were killed." And he starts sobbing, and he says, "I don't have any guilt feelings about causing their death."
Get the boop out of here.
You can say the F word. I say it liberally. I toss it liberally like seeds that I'm planting.
Mom doesn't like me saying those words.
Joyce, relax your crack.
Your
baby girl's gonna say fuck every now and then. Guess who else is? Me.
She said hi, by the way.
Hi, Joyce. Hi, Joyce. Okay, so prosecutors said, this is how they said, he was a distraught father, and without context, it's likely that Richard Frank's statement meant that he was with them in spirit.
Okay, just stop the tape, folks.
All right, okay.
Because Munir Deeb in the movie theater,
yes,
quote unquote, jokingly says, "I killed those 3 kids." Mm-hmm. Doesn't know them, right. Has no relation to them.
No, he does. He knows Kenneth Franks.
Oh, right.
Kenneth Franks called him, Gimpy.
Okay,
because he had a limp.
Right, but doesn't have a real,
in my mind, a real motive,
relationship, not a real motive. And he gets arrested and jailed and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. The father of the victim cries and admits to something and nothing.
Well, I don't know,
Because it makes a lot more sense. One of the things you said last episode is that these were all troubled kids that were in special
They were at the Methodist
homes.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a troubled kid with a dad who put him in a home. That makes a hell of a lot more sense than limping
Munir
killing virtual strangers.
Well, he didn't. He contracted the 3.
Well, whatever.
Right. So I'm going to say this, and I don't want it to be a thing, but I feel like I have to say it. It's 1982. Things are different. I'm not saying Richard Franks wasn't supportive of his son. But Kenneth Franks was gay.
Oh, boy. Wow.
I know.
There goes another tentacle
Yep.
on that octopi.
Yep. Kenneth Franks was gay, and he had a partner, and he was friends with Jill and Raylene because he knew Jill from the Methodist home. They were friends. They were all friends. I thought when I started this research that the three kids maybe were in some sort of weird, troika relationship, but Kenneth was gay. And I don't know that Richard Franks would kill his son. I don't think this was new information. I don't think it was something he liked, but, saying I went to look for my son when he wasn't home at midnight, and then three kids end up dead, and your car is seen in the area. There are so many probable suspects in this case.
Not to me, not anymore.
I don't know that Kenneth Frank's dad killed him, and
But okay, and that's cruel. We are talking about real people, and I
Right.
apologize for being flippant.
it's not at all.
flippant.
Not at all.
But just knowing that information, don't we start with the dad? I mean, aren't those the rules on Law and Order? Don't you just
Well,
start with the wife?
You do. You start with
You
those
start
close.
with the people,
Yeah.
and then
Right. You start with the in-laws, not the outlaws, is the way I've heard it put. And I like that.
I do too.
And that's why Kenneth Frank's father, Richard Franks, was given a polygraph.
Which he failed miserably.
But they were saying because he was distraught.
So now, excuse number 2 for Daddy. I know I just said I apologize for being flippant.
It's okay. You're not being flippant. You're raising great points. When I found out Kenneth Franks was not out, but gay and had a partner, it's 1980. It's 40 years ago. There are still parents.
In Texas.
Yeah, in Texas. There are still parents that can't accept.
Lake Waco, Texas.
Right. I know. Okay.
I mean, and not saying again that this man would kill his son over
Right.
this.
And 2 girls, and bite their nipples off and put his sunglasses on his son. Take their bras off and tie it around their ankles. Take sticks and, injure their bodies. I don't.
But what do we know about this father?
Not much more. I know he had tried to, it was 1982, so you don't have the internet, and you're trying, you don't have cell phones, but he's trying to find, he knew where his son was going and with who, so he was trying to find, through the phone book, the parents of Raylene Rice and Joe Montgomery, and try and find who, where are they living, who are they living with, well, has anyone reported them missing, We know he tried to do that. Did he do that because he was, trying to cover
his
him
tracks?
I'm not feeling that, but I feel like this was such a big case at the time, and it was so overwrought with emotion that people said and did things that was so ridiculous it made everybody look guilty.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just,
It's still quite troubling that they didn't do much more than, he got the polygraph.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 2 strikes now. You've made this confession and you failed the polygraph.
But the confession is goofy sounding, and prosecutors are like, he meant he would. This is out of context, and it feels like he means he's there in spirit. This is
Okay.
what the prosecutors say.
But that's fine. But then don't go after the guy that runs the 7-Eleven. The Quickie Mart.
Right.
Right. What's the name of the place?
The Rainbow Market.
Yeah, don't go
Yeah.
after the guy that runs the convenience store.
Right. Well, he had a sort of a relationship. Okay, so we're gonna get to the bite mark evidence being so well, handled. But I'm going to say that, David Wayne Spence on the morning of April the 3rd met with his loved ones, including his ex-wife June, only one of his sons, and his brother Stephen. His mother had been murdered while he's there. He signed the paperwork for the disposition of his personal property. He recited the 23rd Psalm, which he said gave him peace. June asked him to spend like 10 minutes alone with each of his family members. And, she said, can you give us all something? And they each got something that he had one of his possessions. His attorney was like, look, we're still trying. We're putting, petitions in, but they were all denied. Even a last ditch motion was denied. So he's strapped onto a gurney in the execution chamber, and his IVs are placed in his arms. He looked through the glass at his relatives and the relatives of the victims. Kenneth's mother had come to watch. Jill's brother, Brad, who was the most outspoken and had also was the one who said, we put Truman Simons on a pedestal and maybe he orchestrated all this. They're all there, and he looks directly at them and says, I want you to understand I speak the truth when I say I didn't kill your kids. Honestly, I have not killed anyone. I wish you could get the rage from your hearts and you could see the truth and get rid of the hatred. And Brad Montgomery turned his head to the side and said, just die. Just die. Right. So he turned to look at his family and he said, I love you all. This is very important. I want you to know I love you all. I miss you all. And now I'm finished. At 6:32 p.m., he's pronounced dead. So the bite mark evidence of the Homer Campbell from the American Board of Forensic Odontology. The evidence was, reviewed by the president, and he goes, Homer Campbell's methodology is well outside the mainstream. There were 2 attorneys that were found just 2 months after Campbell had testified against Spence and, called in his evidence into question. And they were like, oh, you know what? Another case he'd worked on. This is the exact bite mark of a missing Florida teenager. And, this is him. And 2 years later, that kid turned up alive. So it wasn't his bite mark. He was alive. It wasn't his, remains that were found. Mm-hmm. So the head of the American Board of Forensic Odontology chose 5 experts around the country. And he sent them molds and autopsy photos of, Jill and molds of all of actually David Wayne Spence, I believe. And the results came in and they were really odd. The experts could identify several of the patterns on the girls' bodies as possible bite marks, but they wouldn't go further than that. One of them said the photos were of such poor quality, I'm not even going to compare these to the molds. A second one wrote, the marks are more than likely not made by insects, but I can't tell if they're made by teeth. If the purpose of the exercise was to match these marks to a set of teeth, it's kind of unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. A third expert said there's some contusions on one of the body that are probable human bite marks, but I can't match any of the molds to them. 2 others did match a mark to one of the molds, but it wasn't Spence's. It was a red herring that belonged to a housewife from Kansas. They put her mold in to say,
Yeah.
So the odontologist took way too long to actually come to their conclusion. And even though David Wayne Spence's team was like, we need to put this in so we can get him, a retrial. So they filed all the documents they had, but they didn't have all of that, they waited and waited. And then they called it David Wayne Spence's last good shot at a new trial. But a judge rejected 18 months of grueling work. And he said, I am not persuaded that this evidence is material. That was his official. So David Wayne Spence's attorneys can't get a break. David Wayne Spence is executed. The Melendez brothers go to their graves, both dying in prison, saying they were innocent after all of their stories saying they were not. So in my mind, if you have any tips on the Lake Waco murders, because I'm not quite sure that it's a closed case anymore. I think it may always be a cold case in a lot of people's minds. So if you have any tips on the Lake Waco murders, please contact the McLennan County Sheriff's Office at 252-757-5095. You can email us at jttipsters@gmail.com, or you can call us on the Tipster hotline at 847-7837. And more cowbell.